largest aggregation program in the state. Some of you guys are shaking your head. We've got 100,000 customers, saved about $10 million. 70% of the people chose a clean and green option. We could talk about that if you'd like. We also won one of the first Solarize programs. You guys are familiar with Solarize. It was a model program. We've got about 5 megawatts installed through aggregation efforts of bringing consumers together. The clean transportation, oh, sorry about that. So we also have one of the first community solar programs going, where we actually have on this, this was the first program that just got launched last April. And what that is actually on a warehouse, and it provides community solar at a 10% discount, no upfront fees, no cancellation charges, and if you guys want to know more about that too, happy to talk to you about that. But really, I'm focusing specifically on electric vehicles. The other two presenters are also going to talk about design and transport and bikes and walking and properly doing a whole bunch of things. But me, I'm focused in specifically on electric vehicles, and here's why. There's 11 million cars and light-duty trucks currently in New York State. It's the largest source of climate pollution. It's about 34% of greenhouse gases, and it costs a lot of money. Anybody know how much it costs us for gas and gasoline and propane and diesel?
Trillion.
Yeah, great idea. No, per year in New York State alone, New York State economy alone, $19 billion a year. Okay, it's a lot of money that basically we take and put out of state for gas and diesel. When you take a look at an electric vehicle and you go, let's say, 10,000 miles, getting a car that gets 25 miles to the gallon, that would be about 400 gallons of gas. At $2.75 a gallon, that would cost you $1,100 a year. If you had an electric vehicle, which generally gets 4 miles per kilowatt hour, over that same 10,000 miles would be about 2,500 kilowatt hours. Even at the most expensive Con Ed rates in Con Ed territory, which is the most expensive rates in the state, that would still be $625, or a 43% savings with an electric vehicle on fuel. Plus, you get additional savings if you did the CCA with Westchester Power, or if you did community solar, and then, of course, there's a corresponding reduction in greenhouse gases, and even larger reduction in greenhouse gases. And then you take a look at maintenance. So an electric vehicle, pure electric vehicle, instead of 2,000 moving parts in a regular internal combustion engine, you're looking at about 20 parts. No oil, no transmission fluid, very little maintenance. You save a pile of money on maintenance as well. And then you take a look at what's happening with prices, and you see them coming down 18% a year. By the next 5 years, an electric vehicle is going to be cheaper to buy than a gas car, because it's the same thing that powers our cell phones and powers our computers. It's technology that's driving costs down. And what we're seeing is this exponential decrease in pricing. In Con Ed territory, by the way, the utility will pay you an extra $500 a year to charge at night. So when the grid has excess capacity at night, instead of during peak during the day, Con Ed will even pay you, so you save money yourself, and Con Ed, the utility will pay. And when you take a look around the world, this was the latest statistic that came out from Bloomberg. It took the world, some would say, more or less 20 years to get to the first million electric vehicles. You know how long it took to get to the second million?
1 year.
18 months, very good. After we got to the second million, you know how long it took to get to the third?
6 months.
8 months. All right, exponential growth, that's what we're seeing worldwide is happening, folks. This stuff is coming. It's going to come here, it's coming everywhere else. And if you don't believe me, believe the New York Auto Show with those very progressive auto dealers who are just leading the charge on everything. But actually, even at the New York Auto Show this year, they had the 40 different models that are incentivized in New York of hybrids and plug-in hybrids and straight electric vehicles that they were putting out there, that basically every major manufacturer has an electric vehicle now. There's more coming on every day. The state has incentives. It makes a lot of sense to do. In Westchester, we actually have the second highest per capita concentration of electric vehicles in the state right now, about 2,700. They're split up in various different municipalities. We're working with the county on what's happening in these communities and how we can exponentially increase the growth there. And for those of you who are familiar with charging, just some really basic charging stats. So an electric vehicle can use a level 1, which is any standard plug. That's a 110-volt plug. Right? So every electric vehicle will plug in. It's a trickle charge, so you only get 2 to 5 miles an hour, but we'll talk about what that means in a second for most people. Level 2, 220 volt, is the same thing we use for electric dryers or our stoves in our houses, right? Almost everybody has access to 220 volt level 2 chargers. And then the fast chargers are what people usually think about. These are DC fast chargers. Those are the ones like a gas station. You pull in and in 20 minutes, boom, you get 50 to 70 miles out of a 20-minute charge. So level 1, regular plug, level 2, 220 volt, level 3, DC fast chargers. Most people think of the charging, they want to go like a gasoline, like a gas car, so it's level 3. But when you take a look, this is New York City's Electric Vehicle Cooperative, at the pyramid, what you see is that you go from home, where we have total control, to workplace, where we have semi-control, it's a little bit more expensive, and then you get into the intercity and the intracity and the interstates, and as you go up the scale, you need less and less of them because they also cost more and more money, but it's a little more removed, right? But keep that pyramid in mind for a second, because when we take a look in particular at Westchester, and all of you guys should look at your communities as well, we've got about 108 charging stations throughout Westchester. These are all the chargers. We've got about 9 spots for DC fast chargers. So as we start to think about what are we doing, one of the things about the DC fast chargers is how do you locate them strategically so that people have access to these fast chargers when they need them. But the really interesting thing is this statistic, I believe, which is that 90% of all trips are less than 30 miles. Right? So when you look at most of these electric vehicles now that get 100 miles for the charge, what you think about is this. Is if you take a look at this community around our office, there's 5 charging stations. So if you were just to look at that and say, oh gosh, I don't know where I'm going to charge my car, what am I going to do, right? That's the single family detached residence. Hundreds, thousands, actually in Westchester County, it's of the 340,000 homes, half of them are single family detached residents that can plug in at night at a regular socket and gets most of the charge to go anywhere. So especially for families with 2 cars, where one is mostly local, we can have electric vehicles today. We don't have to wait for infrastructure. We don't have to do everything with everybody else. We can have it in our households today and use it for our local trips. Down in Westchester, the other piece is 50% multifamily. At that point, then what you need to do is either have a charger in the parking lots where those people park if they have cars, or at the workplace was that second piece of the pyramid, right? Because if you live in a multifamily building but you have a charger at work, you just go to work and you charge, and you don't have to worry about it, right? So those are the first 2 priorities that we believe need to happen there. We focus first on municipal fleets. We've got discounts right now on the Nissan Leaf, which gets 150 miles, the Chevy Bolt, 225 miles, and the Ford Police Hybrid Responder, which isn't a plug-in, but basically for police guys who are usually a little more regressive and not quite so progressive about adopting new technology. This is a standard police Ford responder, but it's a hybrid that gets twice the gas mileage. So it's sort of like a half step for these guys, and it's even cheaper, the way that we've been able to do it by putting out bids, it's even cheaper than a regular responder. So for police departments, it's a nice half step. And then we've got public discounts right now on the Nissan Leaf, just to give you a sense of that. It's $2,000 from the state, off right at the dealer. It's $3,000 from the discount that we negotiated for Westchester, and many people will have that access. And if you don't have that access in your community, if you're not in National Grid, National Grid has that same discount now. But if you're not in National Grid, we actually have the ability in Westchester to extend that offer around the state. So if you guys are interested, please send me an email. So it's $5,000 cash off, then the $7,500 federal tax credit, you file that at the end of the year, so it's $12,000 off the car, which is basically a 3rd price reduction.
Is the federal still in place, and
Still
how
in
long is
place.
it gonna last?
Still in place, still there, we beat it back last year, it's still good, it's looking good for the next bunch of years, people think that pretty much it's gonna stay there.
The Leaf doesn't work on the fast chargers, correct?
It does work on a fast charger, and actually, when you get the Leaf in most communities, you gotta double check, but you get 2 years of free public charging,
Okay.
so, which is kinda nice too.
Because we have a Leaf, but it's an older model, and it's
Maybe,
not
yeah,
fast
sorry,
chargers, so
yeah,
that's okay.
yeah,
I
it
just
started
know
last
the
year, I don't know when, I
technology's
know last
changing.
year it did, but last
Great,
year and this
great.
year it's there, so
No,
because of
that's
fast
good, that's
charging,
cool.
so sorry,
No,
yeah.
it's not good.
Okay. And then, of course, we talk about medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles, which people think are gonna take a lot longer, it's gonna be a whole big thing, right? Especially buses, right? But this is China, right? This is one city in China, Shenzhen, China, some of you are shaking your head, you know about that? 16,000 electric buses, that's more than New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Toronto combined, right? So this stuff can happen, it's starting to happen, we're gonna make it happen. And then we take a look at school buses. 500,000 American school buses, it costs us $3.8 billion, those are carcinogen-laden diesel fuel. And now we've got Bluebird, one of the big, I don't know how many of you guys got Bluebird for your school buses, or Lion, the other one, the other big major one that is in use in most places around the state. They both have it. Basically, every bus company is coming out with an electric bus. And the interesting thing, besides the fact of no emissions, besides the fact of saving money on fuel, besides the fact that, you know, it makes sense for our kids as leadership, is the fact that these things, the vehicle to grid option, is that if you took those 500,000 school buses and you electrified them, not only would it be good for health, not only would it be good for the environment, not only would it be good for taxpayers, but in addition, these things are like giant batteries. And they sit there for 18 hours a day, generally in between the rides, doing nothing. And if you took those and you fed them into the grid, which is what Kamen is doing a demonstration project with down in New York City right now, you feed them into the grid when you need it during the summer, during peak, all of a sudden you have this massive storage capability that you can move, it's transportable, you can use it for resiliency purposes. When the grid goes down, you can bring a school bus in and power up a community center or whatever else, right? Right, it's just incredible, right? So we have 3 goals with this campaign in Westchester. 1, an EV in every garage. If you've got a single-family detached residence, you should have an EV. If you've got a multifamily building with your garage, you should have a charging station there. Great for local trips. Basically 90% of your trips, you don't have to think about charging. You just do it at home or in your garage. Transition to municipal fleets. We've got a campaign going on to transition to fleets systematically through all the 43 municipalities. And then coordinate plans for charging infrastructure, because you got a little bit here, a little bit there. We don't really have one coordinated effort, and that's what we're doing, and that's who I am.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes,
You
please.
said Westchester was number 2, so who's number 1?
Long Island.